The sound of the gunshot was still echoing in the maternity ward of Buffalo City Hospital when the screams and hurried footsteps of the staff echoed in the hallway. In room 206, 19-year-old Aria Nelson lay on the bed with a red stain spreading across her hospital shirt. Her eyes, not long ago looking at her newborn twins, now stared lifelessly at the ceiling. Detective Ella Perez arrived on the scene first. Her heels clacked on the hospital linoleum, filling the hallway with a rhythmic sound that contrasted with the chaos around her. She entered the room, donning latex gloves, and stopped at the threshold, absorbing the scene with the eyes of a seasoned investigator. "Shot at point-blank range," she noted, bending over the body. "Right through the heart. No chance of survival," said a deep voice behind her. Ella didn't turn around. She knew that voice, belonging to her partner, Detective Henry Lewis. "Henry, this is either a man who knew exactly where to shoot, or he was just lucky," she said, scrutinizing the bullet entry wound. Henry Lewis, a large man of 45 with tired eyes and a patina of gray on his temples, stood beside her. His dark skin seemed even darker in the bright light of the hospital lamps. "Did the nurse find the body?" he asked, pulling out a notebook. "Yes. She came in to check on the patient's condition after giving birth. The twins had been taken to the pediatric ward 10 minutes before. The killer waited until she was alone." Henry looked around the room, noting the open window. "What did the witnesses say?" "No one saw anything. A nurse heard what sounded like a pop, but at first thought it was a balloon bursting in a neighboring room. The head of security is reviewing the security footage." The forensics team worked methodically, photographing the body, collecting evidence, measuring distances. The air smelled of antiseptic mixed with the metallic taste of blood. "What do we know about the victim?" Henry closed the notebook and shifted his gaze to the young woman's face. "Aria Nelson, 19 years old, local, just gave birth to twins, but she already has one child 2 years old. Didn't work, was on maternity leave, lives on welfare and with her mother's help." 19 years old and already 3 kids, Henry said quietly. "Who's the father or fathers? We'll have to find out. Her mother is on her way here." Ella looked around the room once more. On the table next to the bed was a small picture frame with a picture of a smiling baby, Aria's firstborn. Who would want this young mother dead just minutes after the twins were born? That's the question Detectives Perez and Lewis had to find the answer to. "I need to talk to the staff," Ella said as she left the room. "You checked the list of visitors for the last 24 hours. The interview with the medical staff began in the break room on the same floor. A pale nurse sat at her desk, her hands clasped around a cup of cold coffee. She was the one who had discovered the body. "I've never seen anything like this in 15 years on the job," Nurse Johnson said, wiping away tears. "She was so young, and those babies." "Can you tell me exactly what you saw before the accident?" Ella asked, turning on the recorder. "I took the twins to the pediatric ward. It's standard procedure. Then I checked on the other patients. When I got back to her about 30 minutes later, she wasn't breathing." "Did anyone go into her room?" "Just doctors and nurses, and the father of the twins right after the birth, but he left early. I saw a doctor leaving her room, but I don't know him. I thought it was a new resident." Ella was visibly tense. "Describe this doctor." "Tall, thin, wearing a lab coat and a mask. I've never seen him before, but it's a big hospital." "Did you notice anything unusual about his appearance or behavior?" "He walked fast, didn't look up, but I didn't pay much attention." Henry joined them with a folder in his hands. There was no one suspicious in the visitor's log. The children's father, Jamal Taylor, was here from 11 to 12. The shot was fired at 12:45. Nurse Johnson saw an unfamiliar doctor leaving Aria's room, Ella reported. "I'll check the list of all the medical staff working today," Henry replied. At that moment, loud voices were heard in the hallway. Chanel Nelson, Aria's mother, had just arrived at the hospital. "Where is my daughter? What happened?" she shouted, trying to break through the police cordon. Ella quickly stepped out into the hallway and introduced herself. "Mrs. Nelson, I'm so sorry. Come with me. We need to talk." They sat down in a small counseling room. Chanel Nelson, a 42-year-old woman with tired eyes and early wrinkles, looked at the detective with disbelief and horror. "Is this true? Is my little girl dead?" she asked in a trembling voice. Unfortunately, yes. I'm so sorry, Ella replied. Chanel covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Who? Who would do such a thing? We're working on it, but we need your help. Tell us about Aria, her life, her relationships. Chanel wiped away her tears and took a deep breath. She was a good girl, just unlucky with men. She'd had her first child at 17 with Theron Robinson. He was 6 years older than her. Then twins with Jamal. It was hard for her, but she got through it. What was her relationship like with the children's fathers? Jamal was fine. He came around, helped out when he could, but with Theron. Chanel pressed her lips together. Aria wouldn't let him see his son. Said she didn't want the kid hanging out with a man like that. Why not? He was dealing drugs, doing time. Aria was afraid of his influence on the boy. Theron threatened her? Yeah, all the time. Calling, coming over. Demanded to see her son. Even tried to sue for custody, but his criminal record kept him out. Ella exchanged glances with Henry, who quietly entered the room and listened to the conversation. Where is Aria's eldest son now? He asked. At my house with a neighbor. I was supposed to pick up the newborns when they were discharged. And now... Chanel's voice trembled. What's going to happen to the kids now? Social services will take care of that, Ella replied softly. Do you have Theron Robinson's contacts? Chanel nodded and dictated a phone number and address. While Ella talked to the victim's mother, Henry returned to the room where the forensic experts were finishing their work. Anything interesting? He asked the team leader. Found a casing, he replied, holding out a clear bag containing a small metal cylinder. Non-standard caliber, the kind of ammunition not usually found in street thugs. Probably a contract killing. Henry scrutinized the evidence. What else? Clear shoe prints under the window outside. Looks like the killer got out through there. And one more thing. The CSI pointed to the doorknob. Partial fingerprint. It's already been analyzed, but it'll take a while to identify. How soon can you get the results back? Should be in by tomorrow morning. Henry nodded and pulled out his cell phone to call Ella. We've got a non-standard caliber shell casing and a partial fingerprint. Looks like a contract killing. I'm just talking to Aria's mother, Ella answered. According to her, Aria had a serious conflict with the father of the first child. One Theron Robinson has a record for drug dealing. Aria wouldn't let him see his son. Sounds like motive, Henry noted. Let's check his whereabouts at the time of the murder. Back at the police station, the detectives began to process the information they had gathered. The first notes, photos, arrows connecting possible connections appeared on the board. So here we are, Ella said, standing in front of the board. A young mother who had just given birth to twins was shot dead in her hospital room. Killer entered disguised as a doctor, probably a contract killing, judging by the unusual caliber of the weapon. And we have our first suspect, the father of her oldest child, who was angry because he couldn't see his son, Henry added. We need to check Theron Robinson's alibi and gather information on his connections. If he ordered the hit, we need to find out who did it. Don't forget Jamal Taylor, the twins' father. Although he left 45 minutes before the murder, he could have hired someone. Ella nodded and looked at her watch. It's getting late. We'll start the interrogations tomorrow morning. In the meantime, we'll request the hospital's security footage and run the fingerprints against the database. The first day of the investigation was coming to an end, but Detectives Perez and Lewis knew that this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the city was the man who had taken the life of a young mother on what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. And this man had to answer for his crime. The morning began for Detectives Perez and Lewis with a cup of strong coffee and a stack of reports on the desk. Preliminary forensic results confirmed their assumptions. Aria Nelson had been shot in the heart at close range. Time of death was between 12:30 and 13 hours the previous day. Jamal Taylor will be here in 20 minutes, Ella reported, reviewing the call records on the victim's cell phone. Aria had been in frequent contact with him and his mother over the past few weeks. There are also a few missed ones from an unknown number. Check that number, Henry said, studying the crime scene photos. It could be Theron Robinson. Jamal Taylor entered the interrogation room with his head down. The 24-year-old father of the twins looked haggard and confused. His red eyes spoke of a sleepless night. Mr. Taylor, Ella began, turning on the recorder. "Thank you for coming. We need to ask you some questions about your connection to Aria Nelson." "I didn't kill her," Jamal answered immediately. "I loved her. Loved her." "Tell us where you were yesterday between 12 and 13 o'clock, Henry asked, watching the young man carefully. "I was at the hospital until 12, seeing Aria and the twins after the birth. Then I went to work at the warehouse. My shift started at 13. You can check with my supervisor." "We will," Ella nodded. "How has your relationship with Aria been going lately?" Jamal ran his hand over his face, as if trying to wipe away his fatigue. "It was fine. We weren't together, but I wanted to help with the kids. They're my kids." "Have you had any conflicts with Aria?" "The usual disagreements, nothing serious." "What about Theron Robinson?" Henry asked, watching Jamal's reaction. "Do you know him?" Jamal's face tensed at the mention of that name. "I know him. Bad man. Aria was afraid of him." "Why?" "He threatened her. He wanted to take her son, but Aria wouldn't let him. Said he was a bad influence on the child. He was furious about it." "When was the last time you saw Robinson?" Ella asked. "A week ago. He was at Aria's house, yelling. I was there, helping her pack for the hospital. I had to call the police to get him away." Henry made a note in his notebook. "Did you see him at the hospital yesterday?" "No," Jamal shook his head. But he knew Aria was due to give birth these days. After questioning Jamal, the detectives checked his alibi. The warehouse supervisor confirmed that Taylor showed up for work at 12:45 and stayed until the end of his shift. "Jamal's clean," Ella said, closing the report folder. "Now we need to know more about Aria's life and her conflicts with Theron Robinson." They traveled to the small house on the east side of Buffalo where Aria lived with her first son. Chanel Nelson met them at the entrance, holding a 2-year-old boy in her arms. "This is Kevin, Aria's son," she introduced the child. "He doesn't yet understand what happened to his mom." The small living room was a mess, typical of a home with a small child. Toys on the floor, children's books on the couch, pictures on the walls. "Tell us more about Aria's conflict with Theron Robinson," Ella asked, sitting down in a worn armchair. Chanel sighed, settling her grandson on her lap. Theron had come into Aria's life when she was 16. He was older, seemed cool to her. When she'd gotten pregnant, he'd promised support at first, but quickly disappeared. He reappeared when Kevin was a year old. "What happened next?" "At first, Aria let him see the baby, but then she found out he was dealing drugs. She found a baggie of the stuff in his pocket while he was holding Kevin. After that, I forbade him to go near my son." "How did Theron react?" "First he begged me to give him another chance, then he started threatening. Said he'd take the baby away, that she'd regret it. He even tried to file for custody, but his criminal record denied him." "When was the last time you saw him?" "A week ago. He came by, yelling outside the window. Aria called the police." Ella looked around the room, noticing the baby pictures on the walls. "Do you have an address? A place of employment?" "He's a longshoreman at the port, sometimes moonlighting at a machine shop on Oak Street. Lives somewhere in the Riverside neighborhood. I don't know the exact address." "What about friends? Who does he hang out with?" He's got a buddy who's a junkie. Aria didn't like him much. She said he had a creepy look in his eyes. His name's Ray, I think." Henry and Ella looked at each other. "Do you know his last name?" "I don't remember." Chanel shook her head. "But everyone calls him the Shadow. He's skinny as a skeleton, eyes sunken in, typical junkie." Back at the station, the detectives began to check out information on Theron Robinson. His record confirmed what Aria's mom said. 2 drug convictions, 1 for assault. Last arrest was 6 months ago, but the case was dismissed for lack of evidence. "We need to find this Ray guy," Henry said, studying Theron's picture from the police database. "If he's connected to Robinson, it could lead us to the killer." "The hospital surveillance tapes should be up by now," Ella replied. "Maybe we'll see our doctor there." Officer Johnson was waiting for them in the technical department with the prepared videos. "I went through all the cameras in the maternity ward between 12 and 13 o'clock, he reported. "Here's what I found." A black and white image of the hospital corridor appeared on the screen. The clock in the corner read 12:32. The camera captured a tall, thin man in a medical gown and mask walking down the corridor toward Arya's room. Here he is entering the room. The officer switched to another camera. The man in the robe looked around before entering room number 206. And here he is coming out 7 minutes later. The footage showed the same man walking quickly out of the room and toward the emergency stairwell. He doesn't get further into the view of the cameras inside the building, but the outside camera shows someone getting out through a first-floor window. The new image showed a dark figure jumping off the windowsill and quickly disappearing between cars in the parking lot. "Can you zoom in on his face?" Ella asked. "The quality isn't great, but I'll try." The officer enlarged the image and applied filters to improve clarity. Despite the medical mask hiding the lower part of his face, the sunken eyes and protruding cheekbones were visible. "Send this footage for recognition," Henry said, "and check the database for any known drug addicts named Ray or Shadow." An hour later, the facial recognition system produced several possible matches. The detective scrutinized each file until Ella settled on one. Raymond the Shadow Williams, 28 years old, repeatedly arrested for drug possession and use. Last arrest was 3 months ago. Appearance matches the man on the tape. Any connection to Theron Robinson? We'll check it out now. Ella went through both men's arrest records and found a match. Here, they were busted together 2 years ago on a drug bust. Robinson as the dealer, Williams as the buyer. "That's our man," Henry nodded. "Now we need to find him and put him under surveillance. If he's the killer, he'll probably contact the buyer." The detectives got a warrant for Ray Williams and the address of his last known residence, a dilapidated building in a seedy part of town. "We're going there now," Ella said, checking her service weapon. "But we'll be careful. If he killed Arya, he's probably armed and dangerous." The building where Ray supposedly lived was a 3-story shabby house with broken windows on the first floor. The detectives parked a block away and watched the entrance for a while. "Apartment 8, 2nd floor," Henry said, studying the floor plan. "But it's not certain he's there. People like him are often evicted for non-payment." "We'll wait and see," Ella replied. Their patience was rewarded 3 hours later when a thin man with characteristic sunken eyes approached the building. Even from a distance, his nervousness was evident as he kept looking around and fidgeting. "It's Williams," Henry confirmed, comparing the man to the picture in the database. They followed Ray into the building and decided to continue their surveillance. "I wonder if he'll contact Robinson," Ella said thoughtfully. As if on cue, 20 minutes later, Ray left the building and headed for the phone booth on the corner. "He's avoiding using his own phone," Henry noted. "Smart." Using a directional microphone, they were able to partially hear the conversation. "Done, money. Meet me tomorrow. Usual place." Ray hung up and quickly walked back into the building. "We need to find out who he called," Ella said, "and find out what the usual place is." They requested the call information from the phone booth and found that Ray had called a prepaid cell phone that had recently been activated. "It's hard to prove that phone belongs to Robinson," Henry pointed out. "We need to get them together." "We'll keep an eye on Williams," Ella decided. "If they meet tomorrow, we'll be ready." The next morning, the detectives took up position outside Ray's house again. He came out around 10 o'clock, looking around nervously and headed for the bus stop. "Let's go get him," Ella commanded. The bus took Ray to an industrial area of the city. He got off at a deserted bus stop and walked along abandoned warehouses. The detectives followed him at a distance, trying to remain undetected. Ray turned the corner of one of the warehouses and disappeared from sight. "Watch out," Henry whispered as they approached the corner. As they peered around the corner, they saw Ray talking to a man whose picture they recognized from the police database. "Theron Robinson," Ella said quietly. "Now we have a connection." They watched as Theron handed Ray an envelope, presumably containing money. After a brief conversation, the men went their separate ways. "What are we going to do?" Henry asked. "Arrest them now?" "All we have so far is circumstantial evidence," Ella replied. "We need more evidence. We keep following Ray. Maybe he'll lead us to weapons or other evidence." They returned to the car and continued to follow the suspect, who, having been paid for the task, did not even realize that his every move was now under police surveillance. The third day of the Aria Nelson murder investigation began for Detectives Perez and Lewis with an early meeting with the police captain. It was still pre-dawn gloom outside the windows when they laid out the case files on the table in Captain Thompson's office. The evidence, meticulously gathered during the previous 48 hours, pointed to two suspects: Ray, the Shadow Williams, as the direct perpetrator, and Theron Robinson as the mastermind of the cold-blooded crime. "We need a warrant for Williams's arrest," Ella said, methodically laying out the hospital's surveillance photos. Her tired eyes betrayed the sleepless night spent analyzing the evidence. Forensics gave a positive match on biometric data: height, build, characteristic gait, and gesticulation. Plus, we have his clandestine meeting with Robinson yesterday, followed by the handing over of an envelope, presumably with payment for an order. Captain Thompson, a gray-haired man with a shrewd eye and 25 years' experience in the service, scrutinized the case files spread out before him, rubbing his chin. "This may be enough for a warrant and interrogation, but it's not enough for a first-degree murder charge," he observed, setting the photographs aside. "We need more compelling, irrefutable evidence. A lawyer of any caliber would blow a case like this in court." "There's something else of substance," Henry interjected, laying the forensics report on the table. "Our technicians compared the partial fingerprint found on the door handle of the room with Williams's prints from previous arrests. It's a 90% match, a near-perfect identification." Captain Thompson straightened in his chair, his gaze hardening. "Okay, this is getting more serious. Where is Williams currently located?" "According to the latest surveillance, he's in his apartment on the east side of town. We've set up 24-hour surveillance," Ella replied, noting the location on a map of the city. "He doesn't seem to be aware of our interest in him. Act immediately, before he decides to hide," ordered the captain. "But remember, we need a confession not only against Williams, but also against Robinson. Without it, it will be difficult for the prosecutor to build a full-fledged case." By 10 a.m., the special capture team was fully operational. Detectives Perez and Lewis, clad in body armor marked "Police," along with 8 heavily armed tactical officers, surrounded the rundown 5-story building in the most disadvantaged part of Buffalo where Ray Williams lived. "Pre-op briefing," Henry commanded, gathering everyone in the operation around the hood of the police van, which held a floor plan of the building. "Williams is in apartment 8 on the 2nd floor. He indicated the exact location on the schematic. According to reports, the suspect is likely armed and may be under the influence of drugs, making him unpredictable. Team 1 is blocking the main entrance, and Team 2 is blocking the fire escape at the rear of the building. Detective Perez and I will go up to his apartment accompanied by 4 officers. The rest of you control the perimeter. Any questions? Any information on the other tenants on the floor?" Tactical team leader Sergeant Brooks asked. "The neighboring apartment is empty, but there's an elderly woman across the hall who should be at work right now," Ella replied, checking her notebook. "We checked." "Take positions," Henry radioed as the group dispersed around the building. "We're going strictly by protocol. Repeat, suspect is believed to be armed and dangerous." Ella and Henry, accompanied by 4 officers in full tactical gear, climbed the creaky stairs to the 2nd floor. The narrow, dimly lit hallway had a musty smell of damp, mold, and something rancid. The wallpaper on the walls was peeling off in places, exposing the fungus-covered plaster. As they approached the door with the peeling metal number 8, Henry gestured for the group to stop and checked the holstered weapon. Ella nodded to him, pulling out her gun. "Buffalo Police! Ray Williams! Open the door!" Ella said loudly and clearly, tapping the door frame 3 times hard with the handle of her gun. There was muffled movement from inside the apartment, the sound of falling objects, but the door remained closed. "Ray Williams, it's the police! We have a warrant for your arrest! Open the door now, or we will be forced to use force!" Ella repeated more insistently, listening to what was going on outside the door. Suddenly, there was a deafening clang of breaking glass, followed by the sound of overturned furniture. "Movement at the west window," came a tense voice over the walkie-talkie. "Suspect is trying to escape through the window. Let's go in," Henry instantly commanded, taking a step back. One of the tactical officers stepped forward with a battering ram, delivering a powerful blow to the lock. The door rattled, but held. A second blow struck the hinges, and the wooden structure finally gave way, crashing into the room. "Police, get down! On the floor!" shouted the officers, bursting into the cluttered room with guns at the ready. At the same moment, a shot rang out from the side of the broken window. The bullet ricocheted off the door jamb inches from Henry's head, showering him with splinters. "He's got a gun! Take cover!" shouted Henry, pressing himself against the wall next to the doorway. In the narrow room, littered with garbage, empty bottles and syringes, a desperate Ray Williams was thrashing about at the broken window. His lean figure was half out of the window opening, but the grating of the fire escape was too far away to reach. In his shaking hand gleamed a small pistol. "Drop the gun, Williams!" Ella shouted, taking cover behind an overturned table. "There's nowhere for you to run!" In response, Ray fired 2 more shots in the direction of the door. The bullets slammed into the wall, knocking out chunks of plaster. "I'm not going back to prison!" he shouted hysterically. "Leave or I'll shoot! Think about what you're doing, Ray." Henry tried to get through to him. "Don't make this worse. You're risking a bullet right now." "I got nothing to lose," Williams shouted hoarsely, the desperation of a hunted animal in his voice. "Robinson will kill me if I talk." At the mention of Robinson's name, the detectives looked up. It was a valuable confession. "We can protect you from Robinson," Ella shouted, trying to make contact. "But first, drop the gun." Instead of answering, Ray fired again. This time the bullet flew dangerously close to one of the tactical officers. "Sarge, I need tear gas," Henry commanded quietly over the radio. "Ray, this is your last chance," Ella shouted. "In 10 seconds, we'll use the gas." There was a tense pause. Williams' trembling hands dropped, and the gun fell to the floor with a thud. I surrender," he wheezed, slowly raising his hands in the air. "Don't shoot! On the floor! Face down! Hands behind your head!" Henry commanded, slowly approaching the suspect with his gun at the ready. Williams knelt awkwardly and then lay on the dirty floor with his arms outstretched in front of him. His lean body shook with a coarse tremor, partly from drug withdrawal, partly from fear. "Clear," reported one of the officers, picking up Williams' gun and checking the room for other threats. Henry quickly approached the lying Williams and handcuffed him, checking all his pockets thoroughly. "I didn't do anything. It wasn't me," mumbled Ray. But his voice sounded unconvincing even to himself. "Ray Williams, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Aria Nelson," Henry said in an official tone, lifting the suspect to his feet. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot pay for an attorney, one will be provided for you by the state. Do you understand these rights?" While Henry read out the rights, Ella looked around the apartment. Among the clutter, she noticed a white medical coat shoved carelessly under the bed and a medical mask on the table. "Look what I found," she said, carefully picking up the gloved item. "Looks like our doctor's suit." Henry nodded and turned to one of the officers. "Call forensics. We need a thorough search of the apartment. Look for weapons, ammunition, anything that might be connected to the murder." At the station, Ray Williams was placed in an interview room. He was sitting at a desk, tapping his foot nervously on the floor and wiping his face with his trembling hands every now and then. Clear signs of drug withdrawal. "Doesn't look like a cold-blooded killer," said Captain Thompson, watching through the glass. "Don't be fooled," Ella replied. "Men like him would sell their mother for a dose." Henry entered the interrogation room first, carrying a folder with the case file. Ella followed him. "So, Ray," Henry began, sitting down across from the suspect, "we have a lot of questions for you." "I don't know anything," Williams mumbled, not looking up. "I didn't do anything." "Did you?" Ella put the surveillance photo on the table. "Then explain why you were in the maternity ward of City Hospital at 12:32 the day before yesterday." Ray took a quick glance at the photo and averted his eyes. "That's not me." "We have your prints from the crime scene," Henry lied, watching the suspect's reaction. "And they found a medical coat and mask in your apartment, just like the man in the tape." Ray licked his parched lips nervously. "I want a lawyer." "Of course, that's your right," Ella nodded. "But while he's on his way, think about this. Killing a young mother is a life sentence without parole, unless, of course, the prosecutor requests the death penalty." Ray's face turned even paler. "I didn't kill her, I just what?" Henry asked, leaning forward. "Nothing. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer. The detectives left the room, leaving Ray alone with his thoughts and his growing withdrawal. He'll break, Ella said confidently. He needs a dose and you can't get it in a cell. Agreed, but we need more pressure, Henry replied. Forensics have anything new? As if on cue, the phone rang. Forensics found a .22 caliber handgun hidden in the air vent in Williams' apartment. Could it be the murder weapon? Henry asked. Preliminary examination shows that this gun has been fired recently, answered the expert, and the caliber matches the shell casing found at the crime scene. But we'll need ballistics tests to make a definitive statement. Great. That's exactly what we need. Ella turned to her partner. Now we have real evidence against Williams. Armed with the new facts, the detectives returned to the interrogation room. Ray looked even worse, sweat dripping down his face, his hands shaking. I've got some bad news for you, Ray, Henry began, placing the picture of the gun on the table. We found the gun that killed Aria Nelson. And you know where we found it? In the vent of your apartment. Ray's eyes widened with fear. That's not mine. Your fingerprints on the handle say otherwise, Ella bluffed. Look, Ray, you're not going to get away with this. We know you were in the hospital. We know you shot Aria. The only question is whether you acted alone or if someone hired you. I want a deal, Ray said suddenly, his voice shaking. I'll tell you everything, but I want a deal. Henry and Ella looked at each other. What kind of deal do you want? Henry asked. I'll tell him who hired me, but I want a shorter sentence and a witness protection program. He'll kill me if he finds out I talked. Who's he, Ray? Ella asked. Williams swallowed, glancing back at the door as if he was afraid the person he was about to talk about was about to enter the room. Theron Robinson. The detectives glanced around again. Their assumption was confirmed. Tell us everything in detail, and we'll talk to the DA about a deal, Henry promised. For the next 2 hours, Ray Williams, pausing occasionally to wipe his sweat or ask for water, talked about how Theron Robinson had hired him to kill Aria Nelson. We've known each other a long time, Ray said. I used to buy stuff from him. 2 weeks ago, he came to me and told me he had a job. He'd pay me well, and he'd pay me in merchandise too. Said he had to break into a hospital and shoot a girl who'd just given birth. Why you? I used to be an orderly, I know how it works, and I owed him a lot of money. What did Robinson say about motives? He was furious. Said the bitch wouldn't let him see his son, turned the boy against him. That she'd ruined his life and now she was having another man's kids. He said... Ray paused, remembering. He said, since she won't let me be my son's father, let her new children grow up without a mother too. Ella felt anger boiling up inside her. Killing a mother of 3 children for revenge was beyond her comprehension. How did you plan the murder? Theron knew when she was due. He followed her. When Aria went to the hospital, he called me. I got a lab coat and mask from the laundry room behind the hospital where I used to work. Entered the building through the service entrance. And the gun? Theron gave it to me. Said the gun was illegal, unregistered. So you just walked into the room and shot her? Ray lowered his head. She didn't even realize what was going on. Thought I was a doctor, came in to check on her condition. Ella clenched her fists under the table, but kept her professional composure. After the murder, did you contact Robinson? Yeah, as agreed. We met yesterday. He paid the second installment and gave me the goods. Do you have proof that Robinson ordered the hit? Taped conversations, text messages? No, everything was discussed in person. He's not stupid. Henry's been thinking. Are you prepared to testify to that in court? If you give me a defense, yes. After the interview, the detectives discussed the testimony with the prosecutor. The junkie's word against Robinson is weak, the prosecutor said. We need stronger evidence. We could set up a controlled meeting between Williams and Robinson, Ella suggested. Record their conversation. Risky, Henry objected. Robinson might get suspicious. We have no choice, Ella insisted. Otherwise, he'd slip away and Aria's death would go unavenged. The plan was hatched in a matter of hours. Ray Williams, wearing a microphone and under constant police surveillance, was to call Robinson and arrange a meeting. The pretext was the alleged police interest in Ray. Tell him you've been called in for questioning on a drug case and you're afraid they might connect you, Henry instructed. Try to get him to talk about the murder. Ray, still shivering but already receiving medical attention for his withdrawal symptoms, nodded. He won't believe me. He's too smart. He will if you play it right, Ella replied. You want a deal, don't you? Here's your chance to prove you're useful. The call went through. Ray's voice shook, which played to his advantage, making his fear more credible. Theron, we need to meet. Right now, he spoke into the phone. What's wrong? Robinson asked coldly. The cops called me. They asked about you, about our meeting. I didn't say anything, but I'm afraid they're watching me. There was a pause. Where are you now? I'm at the Blue Crocodile Bar. I need to talk to you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Sit tight. The Blue Crocodile Bar was chosen for the operation for a reason, a small semi-basement establishment in Buffalo's industrial district with a single entrance and no back door allowed the police to fully control the situation. 24 hours before the operation, technicians had installed several microphones under the tables and along the bar and placed hidden cameras at strategic points in the room. Plainclothes police officers were scattered throughout the bar, posing as regular customers. Detectives Perez and Lewis watched from an inconspicuous van parked across the street where a makeshift command post with monitors and recording equipment was set up. Ray's in position, one of the officers radioed. He looks nervous, always looking around and sweating. That's a good thing, Ella said, watching the camera feed. His nervousness would look natural. Ray sat at the far table in the corner, frantically clutching a glass of water with trembling fingers. He was wearing a tattered denim jacket and a black t-shirt, under which was carefully fastened a miniature microphone. In his ears, almost imperceptibly visible tiny earpiece through which the detectives could give him instructions. Subject approaching the bar, said a voice in Ella and Henry's earbuds. Black SUV, tinted windows, parked on the north side. Everyone tensed as they watched Theron Robinson enter the bar at a leisurely pace. A large man of 25 with a hard stare from beneath a furrowed brow, he looked around the room with a wary eye, with the familiar gesture of a professional criminal assessing his surroundings and potential threats. He was wearing a leather jacket and dark jeans, and beneath the jacket was the outline of something that looked suspiciously like a weapon. He has a gun under his jacket, Ella said quietly, staring at the monitor. Be very careful. Robinson, making sure there was nothing suspicious, walked slowly toward Ray's table with his hands in his jacket pockets. What the hell's the matter with this urgency? He asked gruffly, sitting down across from Ray and pushing his chair back nonchalantly. I had business to attend to. The police called me in, asked questions about the hospital, Ray began nervously, playing the part of the frightened accomplice exactly as the detectives had instructed him. Theron's eyes narrowed momentarily and he leaned closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. What exactly were they asking? Speak softly. Surveillance footage, Ray continued in a shaky voice. They saw me near the hospital the day well, you know. They said they were looking for a man in a white coat who had entered Aria's room. I told them I was just passing through, but they didn't believe me. I could feel it. Are they directly linking you to her murder? Robinson said icily, giving Ray a glare that made him cringe. Not directly, but they suspect it. Ray licked his parched lips nervously. And if they dig deeper and find a connection between us, they might find you. I'm afraid they'll find evidence that you paid me to eliminate that girl. Robinson's face changed instantly, his features contorted with rage. He leaned forward and grabbed Ray's wrist with such force that he barely held back a cry of pain. Don't you ever, ever, ever say those things out loud, you stupid bastard, he hissed through clenched teeth. I didn't pay you anything, do you understand? Nothing. But you said you wanted me to take her out, Ray continued, writhing in pain, but following the instructions he was getting through the detective's earpiece. You explained that she was keeping you from seeing your son, turning him against you, and you wanted to get back at her. Robinson slammed his fist so hard on the table that the glasses bounced. Shut up, bitch. Unless you want to follow that whore, he growled, slipping his hand under his jacket. In the surveillance van, Ella tensed. He's reaching for his weapon, she said. All units, prepare for immediate entry. Wait, Henry stopped her. Let him bury himself a little more. At the bar, Ray seemed to squirm in his chair with fear, but kept talking, spurred on by the instructions in his earpiece. I'm just afraid the cops will come out on both of us, he whispered. After you gave me the gun for this case and promised to pay me back with dope. That was the last straw. Theron snatched the gun from under his jacket and pointed it at Ray. You're dead, he hissed, pulling the trigger. All squads, assault! Ella radioed in. Suspect has a weapon. Repeat, suspect is armed. In a flash, the bar doors flew open, and police officers in tactical gear burst in, guns at the ready. Police! Everybody stay where you are! Drop your weapons! Loud commands rang out. Visitors fell to the floor screaming, but Robinson was quicker than the detectives expected. Instead of surrendering, he grabbed Ray by the collar, yanked him to his feet, and put the gun to his temple. Get back! He shouted to the cops. Or I'll smash his brains into the wall! You can't prove anything, Robinson hissed, glaring hatefully at Ray. It's a junkie's word against mine. Not just his word, Henry replied, showing a small microphone attached to the table. We have a recording of you threatening Williams after he mentioned killing Arya, and that's just the beginning. We'll find the gun you gave him. We'll find witnesses to your encounters. Robinson's face contorted with rage. She deserved it, he shouted, pressing the muzzle of the gun harder against Ray's temple. That bitch took my son from me, told him I was bad. And then she had another man's baby and she was happy. My son was supposed to grow up with me. The situation was escalating by the second. The bar patrons were lying on the floor with their hands over their heads. The cops had their guns out, but they couldn't fire. Ray was a human shield for Robinson. Theron, put the gun down, Ella said in a calm but firm voice, holding him at gunpoint. She approached slowly, trying to find a clean line of fire. You're only making your situation worse. Right now you have a chance to get out of here alive. Stay back! Robinson shouted, taking a step back and dragging a frightened Ray behind him. I swear I'll smear his brains all over the wall! You think we care about this junkie? Henry asked harshly, shifting sideways to flank him. He killed a young mother. Maybe it would even be easier for us if you spared the taxpayers the cost of keeping him in jail. Ray's eyes widened in horror, and Robinson hesitated for a moment, not expecting this turn. But then you'd definitely get the death penalty, Henry continued, taking another step to the side. Killing a man in the presence of the police is a guaranteed lethal injection. Shut up! Robinson shouted, his eyes darting between the detectives. I'm getting out of here. I want a car and a free pass. At that moment, Ray, spurred on by fear and despair, took a desperate step. Gathering his last strength, he jerked sideways, simultaneously elbowing Robinson in the solar plexus. Caught off guard, Theron involuntarily pulled the trigger. A shot rang out. The bullet whizzed centimeters from Ray's head and crashed into the bar, shattering a bottle of whiskey. That split second was enough time for Ella to make a precise shot. Her bullet struck Robinson in the shoulder of his armed arm. He cried out in pain, and the gun fell from his weakened fingers. On the floor, Henry commanded, lunging forward. But Robinson wasn't going to give up. He grabbed a heavy ashtray from the table and threw it at the nearest officer, hitting him in the face. Then he rushed for the exit, shoving everyone in his path. Halt! Shouted Henry, rushing after him. Robinson reached the door and yanked it open, but was immediately pulled back by 3 armed policemen standing on the other side, guns pointed at him. It's over, Theron, Ella said as she approached him with the gun. On the floor, hands behind your head. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, Robinson slowly sank to his knees, clutching his wounded arm to his chest. Blood trickled through his fingers, dripping to the floor. You can't prove anything, he hissed as the officer snapped the handcuffs on his wrists. A junkie's word against mine. Not just his word, Henry replied, showing the tiny microphone hidden on the lapel of Ray's jacket. We have a clean audio recording of you threatening and actually confessing to organizing Arya's murder. And that's just the beginning. We've already recovered the gun you gave Williams. Found witnesses to your meetings before and after the murder. Robinson's eyes darkened with hatred and despair. She deserved to die, he shouted again as the officers lifted him to his feet. She took my son from me. My son. Told everyone I was dangerous, that I was a bad father. And then she got that stupid warehouse worker pregnant. I gave birth to twins with him, and I couldn't even see my son. Ella looked at him with undisguised disgust. And now your son will definitely grow up without you, she said quietly. And 3 children without a mother because of your selfish revenge. Take him away." The officers led Robinson out of the bar and into a police car. His wound was already being treated by a paramedic called to the scene. Ray, still shaking from the experience, sat in a chair, surrounded by police officers. "I kept my end of the bargain," he said, looking up at the detectives. "He almost killed me." "And you risked your life to help us catch him," Henry admitted. "The prosecutor will take that into account." There was an air of quiet triumph in the Buffalo police station. The conclusion of a high-profile murder case involving a young mother of 3 was a significant success. Captain Thompson personally congratulated Detectives Perez and Lewis on a job well done. "Great job," he said, shaking their hands. "The killer and the client have been caught and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "Yes, but it won't bring back the mother of 3 children," Ella said quietly, putting the documents in a folder and taking down the picture of a smiling Aria with her firstborn in her arms from the bulletin board. "But we did what we had to do," Henry replied, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Justice will be served. It's the best thing we can do for these kids." There was silence in the detective's office, broken only by the ticking of the wall clock and the muffled noise of the working station. The investigation was over. The perpetrators had been arrested, but thoughts of the 3 young children who had lost their mothers to selfishness and revenge lingered in the minds of Detectives Perez and Lewis.